We are speaking with Adriel Kasonta, who is a political consultant and analyst, a European affairs researcher at Wikistrat, and an editorial board member at the Central European Journal of International and Security Studies. He is regularly featured in various print, online, and television media. Welcome to the show, Adriel.
It's a pleasure to be in your podcast.
It's great to have you. I wanted to look at the shifting dynamics between the US, the European Union, Russia, and beyond. It is undeniable that we are witnessing the first, perhaps, great historical geopolitical shift and realignment of the world order that we have known since World War II, marked by the Bretton Woods system, the petrodollar, and the EU. Unfortunately, the Cold War seems to be carrying over. And one of the first topics I'd like to start with is Brexit, which is very timely, since you are based in London. As well. And do you feel Brexit was a wise decision? And, if the EU does end up suffering a great Euro economic crack-up boom, Britain jumping ship in hindsight may have proven to be clairvoyant. So what are your thoughts there?
I will be with you totally honest. And I thank you for asking me this crucial question. It's very important to me, as I was one of the few people who were from the very beginning were paying close attention and were involved in all of this referendum madness, writing policy papers. At that time, when I arrived to London, it was 2013. I was working for the British-Polish Chamber of Commerce as a project manager, and I got involved into policy working of the think tanks, which was the Bruges Group, the oldest conservative think tank in the United Kingdom, where I subsequently became the chairman of the international affairs. And I remember from the very beginning what was the emotion of everyone, what was everyone's thoughts about the Brexit. So let me divide the topic of Brexit on two separate things. First thing is that, to the principle, I do agree that Brexit as a way of being independent, as a sovereign country, was, in my opinion, as a philosophical conservative or conservative thinker, I would say, something positive. It wasn't just me, but if we trace back, because nowadays we can only hear about the Brexit and the push from the far-right movements. I never seen at the very beginning of the Brexit thinking and referendum setting up in the UK, about the far-right members being involved in that movement. In that movement were involved academics like Alan Sked, a famous international history professor from London School of Economics, few think tanks like Bruges Group, where I published the British Euroscepticism pamphlet, and the Bruges Group. Obviously, the UKIP party emerged with Nigel Farage and so on and so forth. But to the principle, Brexit, we have to ask ourselves the question whether we still believe in the nation state as a core of our international interaction on the global arena, or are we totally abandoning the previous thinking in terms of nation states and we are shifting towards the globalized world, one big village? Obviously, through the technology, through the internet and the world becoming a global village, we see that those very boundaries are diminishing. But in my opinion, nation state is something which is ingrained in our humanity, in our human interaction with our other humans. And I do believe that sovereignty of the United Kingdom is something crucial. As I was saying, Professor John N. Gray was taking part in the famous debate in the United States organized by very famous Harper's magazine. And they were discussing the shifts, movements in the European Union, in Europe at large. And someone who is not a conservative, a very famous professor of European politics, Professor John N. Gray, admitted that you can't have a common politics or a common economy within so large group as is Europe. Obviously, we can have a friendly relationship with other countries, and it is very desired after all these years in a past and centuries of bloodshed on our continent. But at the same time, it is not practical to have European Union as a voice for everyone, because as we can see, and as we know from our own perspective and our own experience, even when you are in a family, you can have siblings, brothers, sisters, mother, cousins, whatever. Even though there is a crucial fact that you are one family, members might differ in their opinions. And it is the same with the countries, and even more prevalent when it comes to the countries, because the needs and raison d'etat of the countries in the south, countries in the north, countries in the west, and countries in the east differ because of the geopolitics. So the Brexit, okay, I do agree that at the moment we can see that we have problems, but the question is whether British politicians from the establishment were serious about the Brexit. We know that Theresa May was in David Cameron's previous government, and she was opposing Brexit, as same as David Cameron. So all of a sudden, when she became a prime minister, she started supporting and trying to fulfill the will of the people. Not so, and not really. All of these problems, all of these smokes and screens related to Skripal case, condemning Russia, attacking Russia, are produced by the British establishment and British mainstream media in order to screen the problems, to shadow the problems with the Brexit and British government inability to deliver what was the outcome of the referendum in 2016. At the moment, I do agree, and I agree with those who are for staying in the EU, that Britain will be in a slightly different situation. But here is the fact, and I like the topic which you put for our podcast, the US, EU, and Russia. So at the very beginning, I was strongly believing that Brexit, the whole Brexit movement, was inspired by the high Tory idea within the Conservative Party and within the British populace at large. However, as we can see now, Steve Bannon being involved and coming to United Kingdom and talking to the so-called, in the brackets, far-right movements, Mr. John Sullivan from National Review, and also being associated with the Bruges Group, being involved in Britain coming out from the European Union, I came to understanding that Brexit is of use to United States. I would draw a parallel of what is happening at the moment with supporting for instance, even the nationalistic movements in Poland. I think that the United States want to be in a perfect position as a sea power to have a common ground and common business with the United Kingdom, which is also a sea power. So I think that the whole Brexit thing for the US policymakers involved in that process, as well as for the establishment politicians in this country, is to punish and contain Germany. Germany, as we know from the history, is a very strong country. Obviously, after the Second World War, the vigorous spirit of this nation was somehow tamed. But Germany, regardless of the fact that paid a huge amount of contributions to my home country, which is Poland, and other countries, and it was demilitarized, still is the powerhouse of Europe. So, in business of Germany is to be at good terms with Russia, with China, and we can see that German politicians are trying to voice their own ideas for the future shape of the relationship between Russia, China, and other countries, including Iran, which is also very important. The Brexit is a tool in the arsenal of American foreign policy makers to make a house in within the European Union. We can see that the blame on the house is put on Russia, and in most recent days we can see that China is also becoming to be blamed for meddling, for instance, in the United States, although we don't see and we haven't heard from the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, any evidence. So Brexit at the moment is a disaster, in my opinion, is a disaster because it has been hijacked and the government doesn't have a clear plan for this country, for this nation, and they are heading towards the edge. And the only guarantor of their so-called success is the United States and Donald Trump's administration, which is, in my opinion, unpredictable.
Do you see Brexit happening? Because some of the developments don't seem so optimistic for it to actually happen. There has been reported talk of a second referendum, which the EU has been known to do. When I think it was the Lisbon Treaty in Ireland.
I know, but if we have the second referendum, I can assure you that in this country we will have riots, as same as we had. But it was laughable in 2011. But if in this country people who voted for coming out from, leaving European Union will be told that there is another referendum coming, I can assure you that this country will be torn apart. Because the Brexit topic is strongly polarizing. People are strongly, they have very strong, feelings about Brexit, and I don't blame them. Even those who were in favor of leaving the EU are very concerned with what Theresa May is doing, what her government is doing. But at the same time, there is no other politician who can deliver. Boris Johnson is a joke. Boris Johnson is a clown. As a diplomat, as a chief of foreign ministry of this country, he was a laughing stock. So he can't deliver. Although many so-called true conservatives are supporting Boris Johnson as a new prime minister in this country, but I can't see anyone who could step into the prime minister's shoes. Although I thought some time ago, not long time ago, that Jeremy Corbyn might be a suitable person for this role. But I know that there are powers in this country which will never allow Jeremy Corbyn to become a prime minister.
And so I believe March 2019 is the slated date for Brexit, and I take it you feel it will go ahead, or what are your thoughts?
I really don't know. I would like to tell you that I know what it's going to be, but at the same time, I can see that British politicians are reluctant to deliver. We can see a substitute topics like Skripal case and other stuff. We can see the talks about the cyber threat from the side of Russia and China. So we have smokes and screens. I don't know how the British propaganda will evolve. Brexit is not so probable to happen, but I think that Remexit might happen. So they might give some concessions to the EU, and EU in exchange can give some concessions to the British citizens, because otherwise I can't see it. The only distance between the mainland and the United Kingdom is Calais. So okay, if I want to travel tomorrow go to France, I need to do what? I mean, wait for my visa or whatever. I don't know. So many people are having business. British people in Europe and in other countries as well, and European people and other people in this country. So it is a huge burden for the businesses. I would put the blame on the mainstream parties for not being honest with the citizens, with not being honest at that moment when the referendum happened, and not being honest at this time when we are heading towards the disaster. I don't know how it's going to be in few months' time, literally in few months' time. I'm not even sure that Theresa May will remain a prime minister. They might do some reshuffle in the government, then having some additional time due to the fact that the government has changed, due to the change of the new prime minister, whatever. We don't know. They will just try to, push, kick that, can along the grass. Well, I just feel sorry for the British citizens. I feel sorry for my friends. I feel sorry for my neighbors. I feel sorry for them that they have so irresponsible government and politicians at large, not only government, but politicians in this country.
And moving on then from Brexit and talking about the EU again, from my readings, the origins of the EU come from both European aristocracy in the form of groups such as Bilderberg. We have documents going back to the 50s about them. Yeah. And as well as the American military-industrial complex. It's been also documented that the CIA and U.S. State Department funded some 50% early on of the EU project. And as you mentioned earlier, my dilemma has been always that, having a EU-style government may not be good or bad in and of itself, but it depends on, who's running the show, what kind of what kind of government it is. And until now, Brussels seems to have largely been doing Washington's bidding. But as you mentioned, the EU is starting to become a bit more independent, seemingly. They've teamed up with other countries to create a SWIFT payment alternative so they can continue doing business with Iran. And it's interesting that, Trump appearing not to be a big fan of NATO, so Washington's actions are accelerating this creation, seemingly, of a European army or a European defense force. Yeah. So what's your take on the EU? Are they going to become more independent? Are they going to continue working with Russia, perhaps in the energy sector, with the pipelines and the gas lines, and continue working with Iran? Or are we going to see this struggle between USA and the EU?
We have to take. Thank you for this question. It's a really important question for me as a European person, as a person who is living in Europe. The only way for the aging societies in Europe, in our continent, because in our continent we don't have children being born in this continent, but we are having aging societies. So the only way forward for Europe, for the continent, I will not discuss Europe as a European Union. There's the European Union is a artificial construct. The name has been given by some scientists who just wanted to have a semi United States of Europe. And I would like to quote a French poet, Paul Valéry, who wrote in 1927 the following words: Europe visibly aspires to be governed by an American commission. Its entire policy is directed to that end. Not knowing how to rid ourselves of our history will be revealed of it by a fortunate people who have almost none. That was Paul Valéry in 1927. Brave European people, as same as General de Gaulle, who had a clear vision for our continent. So, in speaking in geopolitical terms, we know such a thing as World Island. Mr. McIntyre was very clear about World Island, Heartland, and other geopolitical concepts. And if we are talking about the United States, United Kingdom, and Europe / European Union, we have to take that into the consideration. European politicians and European citizens, in order to be serious about the future of our children, future generation who are living in this continent, not across the pond in the United States, have to rediscover the term World Island, which is comprising the interlinked continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa. And that gives us not Eurasia, but Afro-Eurasia. This concept has been abandoned many years ago, but in terms of the resources, in terms of the vigorous populace, I think that the World Island has to come together. We can see the attempts on the side of Russia to do the fair business in China. And they are in China not from yesterday. I have family in Africa, in East Africa, in Tanzania, in Kenya. I have also family and friends in Ghana. And I know that Chinese people were doing business with Africans long way before Americans were involved in doing business, as we know how old their country is. So European Union in this particular shape of form doesn't have any future. And America knows that. And I'm glad that you've mentioned that European Union was funded by the CIA. And Professor Alan Sked, whom I mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation, the Emeritus Professor of International History at London School of Economics, and the person who created UKIP at the very beginning, before the Nigel Farage even start, being involved in politics, wrote many years ago, not probably 3 or 4 years ago, a very nice article about this particular topic at the Telegraph here in the United Kingdom. So if we know that this is a project to somehow contain Europe, because European Union is a project to contain Germany. And as Professor John N. Gray said at the Harper's Magazine conference a few years ago, we still don't know how to handle Germany. We can demilitarize them. We can put some fines on them to pay retributions, so on and so forth. And they are still the strongest. So this is the problem for United States and United Kingdom, how to contain Germany.
Mm-hmm. And you wrote a piece some months ago for Forbes talking about Poland and I believe the 3Cs initiative.
Yes,
and
right.
You begged the question, was this the end of Pax Americana? And, Graham Allison, who put out a book about a year ago talking about the Thucydides trap, and myself always just, being a student of history as well, my first degree in the study of history, and just seeing history replay itself over and over again, and looking at the 20th century and the world wars and the decline of Britain and the rise of Germany, Germany having the strongest military in Europe, and then building up a navy to challenge Britain's, strongest sea power. Can you talk a bit about your thoughts on the decline of Pax Americana, and are we going to see another regional or great war, or will things play out through some other form, whether economic warfare or what?
United States and the United Kingdom will not abandon their privileged position easily. We will have tensions. I would not even call this a new Cold War. Cold War is a relic of the past. We are in a different position due to the technological advancement, due to the fact that we are interconnected. We have easy access to news, to alternative channels and sources of news, and to the internet, where we can just, in our free time, read things which are of our interest. I do believe that Pax Americana is no longer in the place. We can see what is happening with regards to China. China is taking over America supremacy. Obviously, it's a different civilization, it's a different culture, and the advantage of United States, of Americans, is our new lingua franca, which is English. Everyone has to speak English, same as previously people were speaking Latin. I don't believe that Chinese language can be that easily taught to such a great extent of people around the world. The pop culture, the cinema, the movies, the advertisements. I mean, all of these social technical tools were put in place to program us to believe and take it for granted that indeed Pax Americana is the only way to go. But we can see that China, Asia countries, Russia, who was, as a country, was backwarded. It was impoverished. After Bolshevik Revolution, Russia was destroyed totally. The backbone of the country, the religion, the literature, the culture was totally destroyed by the Bolsheviks. And it was done by purpose. Obviously, we know that the revolutionists were sponsored by the West at that time. But going back to your question, the only alternative to Pax Americana is a strong relationship and honest relationship between China and Russia. And Europe doesn't have any other way than to join a natural allies, continental powers, to bolster the trade, the cultural exchange. And I will go back to the Professor John Mearsheimer, a famous professor of realism or neorealism from the Chicago University, who gave a lecture at my alma mater, Jagiellonian University in Poland, after CUP in Ukraine. And the lecture was titled, obviously, it's not Putin to be blamed for the disaster in Ukraine, is the West. That was the title of the lecture from the American professor John Mearsheimer. And he foresaw already in 2015, was it, that because of the stronger economic intercourse between Europe and China and Russia as well, United States, and he called them jealous gods of the United States, and I'm just quoting Professor John Mearsheimer, will go ballistic with Europe to put pressure on us to not do business with China, which is impossible, as same as with Iran. It is a double standard from the Americans and Anglo-Saxon thinkers, because they are strongly against monopolies. We know that the conservatives or conservative thought has been suppressed by the libertarian movement, which is for free trade, free everything. But I don't understand as a person, maybe I don't know, maybe it's something wrong with me, but I don't understand if the country which is supporting so wholeheartedly, fervently, liberty, sovereignty, and dignity of the nation and every single person around the world is so greedy that this freedom can be only expressed and exercised towards them. But other countries, for instance Germany, when it wants to have a Nord Stream 2, a pipeline, if Germans, who are more than Americans, who never won any war in their life, never, Germans who fought, who have been beaten, they know what is the real cost of the real war, and they are reluctant to poke the Russian bear. However, Germans have a strong bloc within their governments and political strata of Atlanticists, people who believe that the only way for Germany and other countries is to be in the transatlantic alliance. I don't have anything against trade with America. I don't have anything against cultural exchange with America. But it is something wrong when people from a different continent, from a different country, are people who, in the first place, left Europe in order to search a better life, a new world. That was their decision to go away from Europe and set up a new world. Now, claiming some rights to dictate European governments and European people how we should live, with whom we should have good and bad relationships, vide Russia, China, Iran. This is beyond my comprehension. And this is not fair. And we have to be fair. Because, for instance, if you, I believe that you have neighbors, you have family. And can you imagine that you have wife, children, and your neighbor is knocking to your door, opening the door, coming to your house, setting up new rules, and telling you what you should eat, what should be doing, what color of the walls, and what sort of furniture you should have in your house? That's madness. And this is what Americans are doing, are coming to the continent and telling European governments what we should do and what we should not do. Obviously, Russia is the boogeyman because they are afraid and they have a strong appetite. We, as the students of geopolitics, people who are concerned over geography, history, politics, and culture, should take into account that heartland is placed at the very heart of Russia. The British rhetoric, the American rhetoric, is to deceive, to tell us that, oh, they are bad and we need to militarize ourselves, we need to prevent and we need to target Putin. If you would just come to Earth as an alien today and you would read the newspapers, American or UK newspapers, you thought that Vladimir Putin is almost a god, God forbid. He's involved in everything. He's involved in everything, which is ridiculous. I mean, no one in a fair mind is believing in this ridiculous propaganda. But what they have in mind is to create a climate where citizens, where the people are desensitized and are more willing to have the same situation as we had in this country during the Tony Blair times, where without any clear evidence, United States, UK, and few other European Western countries attack Saddam Hussein. I'm afraid that America and Pax Americana plus United Kingdom, because they don't want to lose this position, will push at the brink of the war. And at the moment, we are nearly at the brink of the war, although we have slightly different type of wars at the moment. We don't have people in the woods. We don't have guerrilla squadrons all over Europe. We have nukes. And we have to bear in mind that both America and Russia, adding China and a few other countries, are nuclear powers. So this type of war will be the final war. So either Americans, or I would rather say not Americans, because I know many Americans who are sane people, who are just regular people as any other people all over the world. But what I have in mind is either American establishment will come to the conclusion that, no, we are not gods. We are not the privileged nation. We are one nation among other nations, and we want to build a good future, a fair future for the future generations of our people, our children, for our children, for our generations, and for other generations of other nations alike. Or they will still be deluded and wanted to rule and want obedience from other nations. We are not slaves. We are not vassal states. I don't feel that. I feel ashamed when my country is doing certain things which are in line of the neoconservative foreign policy makers in Washington. And I do believe that our generation has to reconsider either we want to be in a permanent state of war with everyone, or we want to take a progressive steps towards having a sustainable planet, sustainable cities, sustainable countries where people have jobs, can raise their children, they can live in peace, because most of the people really want to live in peace. And it's not true that Russian or British citizens hate Russians. It's not true that Russians hate British people. It's only the media and governments which are projecting on us the hate. And this is the Nuremberg, trial for that, in my opinion. This is beyond my comprehension. How you can, push people into each other's throats. And this is what is happening with regards to United Kingdom and United States.
So it seems we come down to two options, and this pattern throughout the interviews that I do, my guests seem to come to the similar conclusions. Either the empire of the day will fall into the trap and, as you say, act in a diluted fashion and lead us to another war, or our hope and best option is that the world island, as you say, will call the bluff of the United States, of Pax Americana, and we will avoid a war in this historical cycle and have a more multilateral world where the EU works with Russia, with Iran, with China, and Africa. And so that's what we hope going forward in the coming months and years. So we'll just have to see what happens. And if you have any final thought, and also if you could tell us how people could best follow you and the work that you do.
Well, first of all, my only thought and my only message to your listeners, to our listeners, is to think for themselves, to read as many books as possible, not reading only news and watching TV. I know that we are too busy, too occupied with our jobs, with our studies, with our day-to-day businesses, so on and so forth. But we have to take a step back, think realistically what we want to achieve. Is it sustainable to be in a constant, tit for tat, constant propaganda and warmongering, or just having a people-to-people channels of communication, of mutual understanding? Because war is not that easy. It's not the game, it's not the PlayStation, it's not the, Xbox. War is a disaster. So I only believe, and I wholeheartedly believe, and I wish to every single person who listens to us, that they will think for themselves, and they will pick peace instead of war. Where you can find me on my website, which is www.adrielkasonta.com, or Twitter handle Adriel _Kasonta. You can find me there. You are more than willing. I'm more than happy to follow you. You are more than welcome to follow me, and we can have a meaningful discussion as I have with you, because we came across each other on the very social media, which was Twitter. And I'm really glad that you were having me on your podcast, and I hope that I added some value to the series of your podcast, and I hope that some people will get something for themselves from our conversation.
Yes, and it's great to have you, and thanks for your time again, and hopefully in the future we can do this again.
Thank you very much. Take care.